Hi chums. Right, the the allotment challenge, where there are 10 questions, and I was nominated by Dan from Allotment Diary, so thanks for that, Dan. I haven't been very active this year at all, but I'll come to that in the questions. I'm not going to waste time telling you about that now. Okay, so how long have you had your allotment for? Well, my allotment is my back garden, so I'm very lucky that I'm in a position where I didn't have to wait for an allotment like other people. So about 7 or 8 years I've had it now. It started because about 10 years ago I became very ill and I wasn't able to walk for about 3 years. It was very difficult for me, for mobility. It was very poor. And the doctors were trying to get me moving or get me fitter, and especially to lose weight. I put a lot of weight on. And I said, look, if you can get me moving and walking, I will lose the weight. And they got me onto the really good medication. And within a year or so, I was starting to get on rightly again. So I started the garden up as a way to get exercise, because I have a thing called ankylosing spondylitis, where my bones are fusing together, and especially my spine. You can see the way I'm starting to go forward and over to the right a bit, and that's because my spine is pushing me in that direction as it fuses, and my ribs are all fused, my sternum's fused. So if I don't do the exercise and keep moving, I will eventually not be able to move at all, because my joints will be all fused together. So if you lose it, you never get it back again. So the best thing for me is to keep active in the garden, you know. So I'm using it as therapy basically, and to keep myself mobile. How long do you have to wait? I didn't have to wait because it's my own garden. Where did you learn about gardening? My grandmother and my both grandmothers were gardeners, and I was only a little boy and went to their garden, and a lot of the time was spent looking for dinos. Dinos are earthworms, but I like to call them dinos. So I did a lot of dino excavation, but in the middle of it all I was learning about plants and potting stuff up and planting stuff and picking stuff. I like picking stuff, so I enjoyed that. But then I didn't do any more of that until after I got married, and we came to this house I didn't do much for about 12 years, because I hadn't room in my last house. Had a very small backyard, and when I came to this house, I have about an acre here, and I set a very small garden up at the bottom of the garden, because there was no point in me trying to take over the whole place and make it look lovely when I had the boys playing football. I have only one son, but I have another guy who lived here basically, and I call them the boys. You know, the boys are playing football all the time. My daughter was racing about with her friends, so they basically had the garden for 12 years till they went to university. Even when they come back from university, the boys were out playing football every time they met up after at weekends and stuff. They would beat a ball about the back there, you know. So for about 15 years, the garden was a very small, a couple of little plots in a tiny greenhouse, which my wife maintains I took more out of than the big greenhouse I have now. But back then, every square inch was precious, and I had a very strict rotation for the crops and all. So you could be right. So as I say, I learned the gardening then from YouTube, and I watch a lot of gardeners on YouTube. I've got notes here, that's why I'm looking down. A lot of gardeners, but I tend to follow the northern gardeners, and the one I found first was Dan in Allotment Diary. He's my garden guru basically. But then I've also got Chris and Paul and Glyn and Nigel, Muddy Boots, because they've come along and they're northern as well, and I'm learning a lot from those guys, because even though I really enjoy watching the southern gardeners like Sean and Katie's beautiful, well, both Sean and Katie, and their beautifully produced videos. But there's no point in me trying to plant stuff at the same time as the people down in Hampshire and in London, because we're about 6 weeks behind up in the north here. So it's pointless. So I watch Dan and the boys up in the north and around Leeds and that area, and I follow them, and it means that my timing's better basically. So thanks to those guys, they keep me going, and if I'm stuck, I go and look at their videos. So to those guys, thanks very much. There's a lot of other ones I watch as well, but oh yes, Mark in Weast Allotments, the tidiest allotment ever. That guy deserves about 25 prizes every year just for the condition of his allotment is beautiful. So maybe my allotment will look like that sometime, Mark, but I doubt it very much. Okay, what has been your biggest success this year ever? I think my biggest success ever was growing a melon, especially this far north. And I tried and tried and tried. I had no joy at all. And then I got one from Marshall's Seeds called Sweetheart. I got that 2 years ago. And then I couldn't get it last year. And I can't get it at all now. Oh, sorry, I must lie. I found a lady, Just Seeds, I think it's called. I found her in England, and she's got the Sweetheart Seeds. Sweetheart's a beautiful melon. I'm gonna sink one of my wife's mates now. I gave Paul's wife Joanna a melon for the family, and the next on a Friday night, when I called over, there's a melon, Jan. I said, "Oh, thanks very much." I only had a couple of them, and she got one for the family. And the next week I went over and said to Jan, "Well, what did they think of the melon?" And she looked very sheepish, and I went, "Did Paul get any melon?" And she went, "Not really." And I says, "What do you mean not really?" She says, "Well, Brenton, I cut a slice for myself, and it was so nice I ate the whole thing in one go." So nobody got any at all. So I don't blame her, they are beautiful. So that's you out now, Jan. Okay, what has been your biggest success? That's a Sweetheart. What has been your biggest gardening disaster this year? Without doubt, this year has been the biggest disaster because it was so cold and miserable at the start of the year, the stuff didn't get going properly. And I lost interest then because things were dying, and it got to June and the tomatoes were that size. So they were going nowhere. Even in the nurseries, the tomatoes in June were about 6 inches tall, maybe, So they were pointless, So I thought, I'm going to leave it this year. And it was more to do with disappointment than frustration, I think. And I just thought, right, leave it. And then someone said, it's not a bad thing to leave your garden for a year to lie fallow, to allow it just to recover from all the intensive growing that we do. And that was like music to my ears. So I was able to justify walking away. But I walked away and did nothing. I didn't weed or anything, so the place is a disaster now. So my winter project is to get the garden up and going for springtime. Somebody once said that an hour's work in winter is worth 4 hours in the summer, because you can work and there's no weeds and no growth. You're not sort of chasing your tail like you are in the summer sometimes. Number 7. Excuse me, I'm going to take a wee drink of tea here if you don't mind. I'm kind of drying out here a bit. Do you have a tried and true crop variety that you always grow? Yes, I grow Cara potatoes. I've grown them for the last 3 or 4 years, and they're a wonderful, wonderful potato. If you like a flowery potato, the Cara is the one for you. But Dan in Allotment Diary got me onto another one called Charlotte. Now, traditionally in Ireland, we don't like a wet potato, which is a salad potato, we would consider a wet potato. But the Charlottes are beautiful. I never thought I would like them because anytime I'd had salad potatoes, I thought, no. But when I grew my own and cooked them the way I wanted to cook them, I did dry them out slightly in the microwave by finishing them in the microwave, but they still had the salad consistency. They were still waxy, but they weren't wet, and I enjoyed that very much. Another one that I got from Dan and Chris was Sarpo Mira, and it's a very good potato, and I'll do it again. So my 3 are Cara, Charlotte, and Sarpo Mira for potatoes. For another one I always go is Cobra beans. Dan got me onto those. Cobra beans are beautiful, and the only bean I grow. Now I've tried all sorts of dwarf French beans and runner beans, and none of them touch the Cobra beans. Are you planning on trying anything new next year? Yes. Last year, Scott from the garden pit sent me tomato seeds, and I planted half of them. And I'm really glad I did that because I've still got some for next year. I would have hated to use them all and then die like the ones did this year. They all grew, but they grew very slowly. But they grew at exactly the same rate as our indigenous tomatoes So it wasn't the case that there was anything wrong with the seed, it was the climate, it was just terrible. So hopefully I'll get a go at them next year. I'll maybe sort of keep half of them back again and just plant a quarter of the original lot this time, just in case of another year like last year or this year. Do you preserve your crops? Yes, I freeze them. I've got 3 freezers now because there's only myself and Rosemary here, so we just don't have the eating capacity to get through all the stuff that I produce. So we give a lot of stuff away, but we also save a lot of stuff, and I would tend to freeze it. I've found that blanching makes all the difference to your frozen food. I was freezing vegetables without blanching them first, and then they just went into mush. But I find that with blanching, they do keep their structure pretty well. So I've used freezing a lot. What's your favourite meal to cook with vegetables from the plot? This is easy. New spuds and cobra beans. Beans and potatoes have a wonderful affinity, and especially Cara potatoes and cobra beans. They just work together really well. Any new spuds with scallions. That's I know a very old traditional peasant Irish dish was spuds and scallions. So, and I was reared in that because my father's a farmer, so we got spuds and scallions a whole lot, you know. So, spuds and scallions. But on back to the beans again. Rick Van Man, when he was growing runner beans, he said that he liked white parsley sauce with runner beans because he doesn't know what it is, but just had some sort of affinity. And I tried that with runner beans and it was beautiful. I also tried it with green cobra beans, the green ones, and it was wonderful. Really, really wonderful. It didn't work with butter beans that you take out of the shell, but any podded bean that you eat in the pod, I find white parsley sauce is really lovely. And make it yourself. It's so simple. Just look up YouTube, white sauce, and it's as simple as can be, and far, far better than anything you buy. And the other wee tip I was going to say to you was, when your spuds get older and they're maybe losing the edge a wee bit, I would, and the family have done it for years, put a raw egg onto the potatoes. When you put the potatoes on your plate and squash them up, just get a raw egg and pour it over the top, and the heat of the potato will cook the egg, but that egg and the potato will impart a richness to the potatoes that's getting lost when they get older. The other way, when you're getting potatoes in around about March, April, when they're not just as good as they were in September, and they've been held in gas houses and cold stores, and they're coming out and they're not great. Well, if you put a raw egg onto your potatoes, it's a great job. Now, your potatoes have to be warm. You don't want to die of some sort of salmonella poisoning or something, but I think that scare is nearly gone now. But if you do that, you do it at your own risk, okay? I'm only telling you what I do, alright? So if I want to improve old potatoes, I put a raw egg on top of the boiled potatoes. So that's it, folks. I'm going to nominate tag Gary Entropy. Alright? I want Gary to answer those 10 questions, please. And Scott in the garden pit in America. I don't think anybody has nominated him yet. Okay? I hope that wasn't too boring, folks. All the best now. Bye bye.